Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. I've told this story a handful of times over the years, and every single time I do, I feel that same small knot form in my stomach. It's not a dramatic story. Nothing exploded. Nothing flew across the room. There were no screams echoing through the house. It was quiet. It happened quickly. And maybe that's why it has never left me. It slipped into my life so simply that there was no clear place to file it away. No clean explanation to wrap around it. It just sits there in my memory, unchanged. I was somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. Old enough to know the layout of my house by heart, old enough to remember details clearly, but still young enough to believe that the world was mostly safe. My days revolved around cartoons, toys, and small imaginary adventures that felt big at the time. That afternoon was completely normal. I remember that clearly. There was nothing strange about it. I was lying on my stomach at the foot of my bed, my chin resting on my hands, elbows pressed into the blanket. The TV was on, playing some cartoon I probably can't even name now, but I remember the colors flashing across the walls. Bright blues and yellows, silly background music that bounced in and out of my attention. The volume wasn't loud, just enough to fill the room softly. My bedroom door was open. It sat to my left. From where I was lying, I could see straight out into the hallway. If I leaned up a little higher, I could even see part of the living room beyond it. The house felt calm. Still, I don't remember hearing my parents talk. I don't remember my sister making noise. It felt like one of those slow afternoons where everything is quiet and comfortable. I was relaxed, completely relaxed. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone walk past my doorway. It wasn't sudden or aggressive. It wasn't a blur or a flash. It was casual. A figure moving from one side of the hallway to the other, like someone simply walking by. And I didn't feel scared. Not at all. My first thought was that it was my sister. That's the most natural conclusion. Siblings walk by each other's rooms all the time. Sometimes they try to get your attention without saying anything. Sometimes they want to start a game. I remember feeling a little spark of excitement, like maybe she was trying to tease me into chasing her. So I pushed myself up off the bed and walked toward the doorway. I wasn't tense. I wasn't worried. I was smiling slightly, thinking I was about to catch her hiding or about to start some playful argument. I stepped into the hallway and turned toward the living room. That's when I saw it clearly. It wasn't my sister. It was a figure, solid black, not like someone wearing black clothes, not like a shadow cast by sunlight. It was black in a way that felt solid, like someone had cut out the shape of a person from pure darkness and placed it inside my house. It had the outline of a human, head, shoulders, arms, legs, but there were no details, no facial features, no folds in clothing, no shine, no texture. Just a dark shape darker than the hallway around it. Even then, my mind refused to panic. I still tried to explain it. Maybe she had thrown a blanket over herself. Maybe she was playing a trick. That's how kids think. We search for something familiar before we accept something frightening. The figure walked slowly into the living room. It didn't float. It didn't twitch. It walked the way a normal person walks. Calm, measured steps. Then it turned its head slightly toward me. I can't explain how I know it did that. There were no eyes to see, no face to read, but I knew it turned its head. I felt it. It was aware of me standing there. That moment is burned into my memory more clearly than anything else. Then it kept walking. It moved toward the couch in the living room and slowly knelt down behind it, disappearing from sight. Still, I wasn't fully afraid yet. I truly believed my sister was hiding from me. So I followed. I walked into the living room, stepping lightly around the side of the couch. My heart wasn't pounding yet. I was still half smiling, ready to surprise her. "I got you, Maribel," I said, proud of myself. But there was no one there. The space behind the couch was empty, completely empty. There wasn't room for someone to slip away quiet. There were no doors directly behind that area, no open hallway, no space large enough for someone to hide without me seeing them. Just the couch, the wall, the floor. I stood there staring at nothing. The playful feeling drained out of me instantly. I looked around the living room slowly. Everything was still. Nothing had moved. No footsteps, no sound of someone running away, no giggling from my sister, no door closing somewhere else in the house. The TV in my bedroom was still playing faintly in the background. That's when fear hit. It wasn't gradual. It was sharp and sudden, like something dropped inside my chest. My skin felt cold. My heart started pounding. The room that had felt normal seconds ago now felt unfamiliar and wrong. I didn't walk calmly back to my room. I ran. I ran as fast as I could down the short hallway, back into my bedroom. I slammed the door shut behind me and scrambled I pushed myself into the far corner against the wall, pulling my legs up to my chest like that position could protect me. I sat there, frozen. I didn't scream. I didn't cry right away. I just listened. Every small sound felt amplified. The faint cartoon voices from the TV, the hum of the house, my own breathing. I stared at my bedroom door, half expecting the handle to turn. Nothing happened. No footsteps approached. No shadows slid under the door. After a while, normal household sounds started up again. A toilet flushed somewhere. A cabinet door shut. The kind of ordinary noises that signal life continuing as usual. But inside me, something had shifted. I never saw the figure again. Not that day. Not ever. I don't remember if I told my parents immediately. I might have mentioned it later. I honestly don't know if anyone believed me. Maybe they said it was my imagination. Maybe they said it was a shadow. I can't remember their reaction clearly, but I remember the moment. I know what imagination feels like. I know what dreams feel like. This wasn't either of those. I wasn't thinking about ghosts. I wasn't scared beforehand. I wasn't in the dark. I was watching cartoons in the middle of the day. The image of that black shape walking calmly past my doorway is still clear in my mind. The way it moved, the way it turned its head toward me, the way it knelt behind the couch and vanished. As I grew older, I tried to reason it out. Maybe it was a trick of light. Maybe my brain filled in details where there were none. Maybe my sister had somehow run off without me seeing her. But the more I replay it, the less those explanations satisfy me. Shadows don't move with intention. People don't disappear behind furniture without a sound. And the memory doesn't feel fuzzy like a dream. It feels solid, fixed in place. To this day, I can picture that hallway exactly as it was. The angle of the light, the placement of the couch, the open doorway. And I can still feel that exact shift inside me, from comfort to curiosity, to confusion, to fear. It wasn't dramatic. It lasted only seconds. But sometimes, the quiet moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. Because there's no loud ending, no clear explanation. Just a memory of something that shouldn't have been there, walking calmly through your home as if it belonged there more than you did. This isn't my story. It belongs to my wife. And the strange thing is, she tells it without drama. No spooky pauses, no whispering, no trying to make it sound bigger than it is. She talks about it like it's just one odd memory from when she was a kid. But every time she tells it, I feel that same tightness in my chest. It's not because she makes it scary. It's because it fits so neatly into childhood and yet feels slightly out of place, like one small detail in a picture that doesn't belong there. She was around 4 or 5 years old when it happened. That age where memories stick in pieces, clear in feeling, softer in detail, but still real. It was Christmas Eve. And if you remember being that age, you know Christmas Eve feels electric. The air feels different. Every sound matters. Sleep feels impossible. In her house, Christmas had its own traditions. Her dad loved keeping the magic alive. After she and her siblings were tucked into bed, he would go outside and make it sound like Santa had arrived. He would stomp on the roof or in the yard. He'd shake bells so they jingled in the cold night air. Sometimes he'd even thump around lightly to mimic reindeer landing. It was playful. Sweet, the kind of thing parents do because they know it only works for a few short years. That night was like every other Christmas Eve. She was in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The room was dim, probably lit faintly by a hallway light or moonlight coming through the window. She remembers listening closely, waiting for the sounds. Kids on Christmas Eve don't just hear things, they listen for them. At some point, she heard something outside, probably her dad doing his usual stomping and jingling. She sat up in bed, excitement running through her. Her window faced the yard. It wasn't huge, just a regular child-height window with thin curtains. She turned her head toward it, and that's when she saw it. Standing outside her window was a figure, tall, very thin, long arms and long legs, almost too long for its body. A large head, big eyes. When she describes it now as an adult, it sounds almost exactly like what most people would call a classic alien. The gray kind, the thin, spindly body, the oversized head, the huge dark eyes. But at 4 or 5 years old, she didn't think alien. She thought elf, Santa's elf. Her mind did what children's minds do best. It took something unfamiliar and fitted into the story it already believed. Of course Santa had helpers. Of course they might come close to the house. Of course they might look a little strange. Elves aren't supposed to look like normal people. She says she wasn't scared. That's the part that always catches me off guard. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't frozen in terror. She wasn't hiding under the covers. She just looked at it, curious, a little amazed, like she was seeing part of something magical. The figure didn't wave, it didn't tap on the glass, it didn't move dramatically. She remembers it just standing there, watching, or maybe observing the house. It's hard to know exactly because memory at that age doesn't come with perfect clarity. Then, just like that, it was gone. She doesn't remember it running off. She doesn't remember it fading away. It was just there, and then it wasn't. The next morning, Christmas morning, she told her parents what she had seen. She described it in simple child language. A tall elf, long arms, big head, big eyes. Her parents didn't know what to say. They hadn't hired anyone. Her dad had only been stomping around making noise. No one had dressed up. No neighbor had been in the yard. There was no prank. They gently brushed it off. Maybe it was a shadow from a tree. Maybe she had been half asleep. Maybe her imagination filled in gaps. But she insists she was awake. She remembers sitting up in bed. She remembers looking directly at it. she remembers feeling calm. As she grew older, something else entered the picture. Night terrors, sleep paralysis. She would wake up in the middle of the night, unable to move, her eyes open, her mind fully aware, but her body completely frozen. She describes feeling like something was in the room, a presence, not necessarily touching her, but there, standing near the bed, watching. Sometimes at the foot of the bed, sometimes beside her. If you've ever read accounts of sleep paralysis, the similarities are obvious. People often report seeing shadow figures, tall shapes, entities standing in corners, a heavy sense of awareness in the room. And if you've ever read alien abduction stories, the overlap becomes even stranger. Waking up paralyzed, a tall, thin figure nearby, a sense of being observed. The thing is, she doesn't believe in aliens visiting bedrooms. She's open to the idea that life might exist somewhere in the universe. That seems reasonable. But she doesn't spend her time reading about UFOs. She doesn't watch documentaries. She doesn't chase conspiracy theories. If anything, I'm the one who gets uneasy about that stuff. Something about the idea of tall, thin beings standing silently in dark rooms has always bothered me more than ghosts or demons ever have. I don't know why. I've never had an experience. It's just one of those irrational fears that sits quietly in the back of my mind. She laughs about that. She'll say, "I'm the one who saw something weird, and you're the one who's scared." And she's right. What makes her story harder to dismiss is the timing. When she was 4 or 5, she didn't have that cultural image of aliens in her head. She wasn't watching sci-fi movies. She wasn't scrolling through the internet. It was Christmas. She thought it was an elf. Only years later, when she saw drawings or depictions of what people claim aliens look like, did she pause and think, that looks familiar. Still, she doesn't connect it strongly to anything supernatural. To her, the Christmas Eve sighting and the later sleep paralysis are separate events. One was childhood. The other is something medical and neurological that many people experience. And she's probably right. Sleep paralysis is well documented. The brain can create vivid hallucinations when it wakes before the body does. It can project figures into the room. It can amplify fear. It can make you feel watched. That explanation makes sense. But explanations don't always erase unease. Whenever she tells the story, she focuses on small details. The cold feeling of the room, the way the window glass reflected faint light, the excitement of waiting for Santa, the quiet outside, and then that tall, thin shape standing there, not threatening, not moving toward her, just there. She still says she wasn't afraid. Maybe that's what unsettles me most. Because if I had seen something like that at 5 years old, I think I would have been terrified. Instead, she saw it through the lens of magic. Now, as adults, we can line up possible explanations. A tree branch casting a strange shadow, a neighbor walking past at just the right angle, a trick of light mixed with excitement and imagination, a half-awake brain filling in shapes. All of that is possible. All of that is reasonable. But there's something about the way she remembers it that makes it feel grounded, not exaggerated, not twisted over time, just a simple image that never changed. And even though she doesn't believe in aliens, and even though I've never experienced anything remotely like it, whenever she describes that tall, spindly figure outside her childhood window on Christmas Eve, I feel that quiet fear stir inside me. Because Christmas magic is supposed to sound like bells and footsteps on a roof. Not long arms, not oversized heads, not enormous eyes staring in through the glass from the dark. I used to work as a security guard at a large post office distribution hub, and my shift was always midnight to early morning. Anyone who has worked overnight security knows the kind of quiet that settles into buildings after hours. It isn't peaceful. It isn't relaxing. It's heavy. It presses in on you. The hum of fluorescent lights feels louder than it should. Air vents sound like distant whisper. Your own footsteps echo in a way that makes you feel like you don't belong there. During the day, that place was chaos. Conveyor belts ran non-stop. Trucks backed into loading docks. Workers pushed heavy carts stacked with mail and packages. Radios crackled. Phones rang. Doors opened and shut constantly. It felt alive. Loud, busy, but at night, especially in the administrative office, it felt like a different building. The admin section was separate from the main sorting floor. You had to pass through thick wooden security doors to get into it. These weren't flimsy hollow core doors. They were heavy. Solid when they closed, they didn't wobble or drift. They sealed with a firm, final sound. Once you were inside, you knew you were inside. My job wasn't glamorous. It was routine. Walk the floors, check the locks, make sure no alarms were triggered, make sure no one unauthorized had slipped in. Most nights were uneventful. I drank too much bad coffee. I checked my phone to stay awake. I counted down the hours until sunrise. That night started like every other. I was doing my rounds inside the admin offices. The lights were on but dimmed. Hallways were narrow, lined with closed office doors on either side. Desks sat empty. Computer monitors were dark. There was a faint smell of paper and carpet cleaner in the air. There wasn't another person in that part of the building. I remember thinking how boring it was. I was walking slowly, tugging on door handles to make sure they were secure. My boots made soft thuds against the carpet. The air felt still and slightly stale. Then, a slam, not a soft closing sound, not something falling off a desk. A full, violent door slam. It was sharp and loud enough that I felt it in my chest before I fully processed it with my ears. The sound cracked through the hallway and echoed off the walls. For a split second, I thought something had exploded. I froze. My body locked up immediately. Overnight work trains you to react fast. Your heart jumps first. Your muscles tighten. Your senses sharpen. The slam had come from inside the admin offices, and I was already inside. There were no open windows, no breeze, no reason for a door to move on its own. The doors in that section didn't casually swing around. They were heavy and required force to open. They closed automatically once pushed, but they didn't build momentum. They didn't gather speed and crash shut. For about 15 seconds, I didn't move. I just stood there in the middle of the hallway, listening. The silence afterward felt worse than the slam itself. It wasn't normal quiet. It was the kind of silence where you're waiting for the next sound, and it doesn't come. No footsteps, no voices, no shuffling. Nothing. I remember thinking, okay, someone could have broken in. That's the logical explanation. Security training tells you to assume intrusion first. Maybe someone forced a door. Maybe someone is still in here. But there was no alarm, no sound of glass breaking, no running, just that one heavy slam. I took a slow step forward, then stopped again. Every nerve in my body was buzzing. I knew how those doors worked. I had opened and closed them hundreds of times. You had to physically push them with some strength. They didn't just move themselves with that kind of force, and I was the only one in that section. Looking back, maybe I should have shouted something. Maybe I should have called out security, like we were trained to do. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking like a guard. I was thinking like a person standing alone in a locked office at midnight that just made a sound it shouldn't have made. I waited longer. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, still nothing. No second noise, no explanation. I don't remember making a conscious decision to leave. I just remember moving. I turned around and walked quickly down the hallway. My pace was fast, controlled, but not quite a run. My breathing felt louder in my ears. My heart was still pounding. When I reached the door leading out of the admin section, I pushed through it and stepped into the main hallway. That's when I stopped pretending I was calm. I ran. Not a slow jog. I ran straight back to the security office. I didn't check which specific door had slammed. I didn't investigate the source. I didn't sweep the hall. I just ran. When I got into the security room, I shut the door behind me and locked it. I went straight to the monitors. Camera feeds covered most of the building. Every screen looked normal. Empty hallways, closed doors, no movement, no signs of forced entry. Everything looked exactly the way it should have. But that slam had been real. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't something you could mistake for ductwork expanding or pipes knocking. I'd heard those sounds before. This was different. This was solid, physical, heavy, the kind of slam you feel in your chest. I sat there staring at the monitors for a long time. I tried to calm myself down. I tried to think logically. Maybe air pressure shifted. Maybe a door hadn't latched fully earlier and finally gave way. Maybe the HVAC system caused a sudden pressure change. But I had worked there long enough to know the building's personality. Every old building has one. You learn its normal sounds. You learn which creaks mean nothing, which pops are just pipes cooling down. That wasn't one of those sounds. The admin doors did not slam themselves like that. The rest of the shift dragged on, painfully slow. Every tiny noise made me jump. The click of the heater turning on, the distant rumble of machinery resetting, even the soft buzz of the lights felt sharp. I avoided going back into the admin offices unless I absolutely had to. And when I did, I moved quickly. I checked what I needed to check and left. When morning came and the day shift arrived, everything looked normal. No doors off hinges, no broken locks, no reports of intrusion, nothing out of place, just one unexplained slam in an empty building. I've worked in other quiet places since then. Warehouses, office buildings, schools after hours. I know what normal building noises sound like. I know what imagination can do when you're tired at 3 a.m. This wasn't that. It wasn't my mind playing tricks. It was deliberate. Strong, like someone grabbed a heavy door and shoved it shut with force. The worst part wasn't even the sound itself. It was what came after. That silence. That thick, empty silence where you're standing alone, knowing every door is supposed to be locked, waiting for something else to happen. And nothing does. Even now, years later, I can put myself back in that hallway. The dim lights, the narrow carpeted corridor, the row of closed office doors, the echo of that slam bouncing off the walls. I still don't know what opened that door. I still don't know what closed it. All I know is that something did, and it was loud enough to feel. About 10 years ago, my life ran on a schedule so steady that I barely had to think about it. Every Thursday night, without fail, I went to my brother's house. We'd hang out for a few hours, talk about work, watch something on TV, maybe order food, and then, at almost the exact same time each week, I would head back to my dad's place. It became automatic. Same bus, same stop, same quiet walk home. When I got off the bus, I had to walk up this narrow paved path that cut between a school field on my right and a row of houses on my left. During the day, that path was completely normal. Kids ran across the field kicking footballs around. People walked dogs. Parents pushed strollers. You could hear traffic in the distance. It felt like any other suburban shortcut. But at night, it was different. The school field turned into a huge open stretch of blackness. Once the sun was gone, the grass just blended into darkness. There were no lights out there, no buildings, just a wide, empty space that felt much larger in the dark than it ever did in daylight. On the left side, The houses were quiet. Sometimes a living room light would glow behind closed curtains. Sometimes a TV flickered blue through a gap in the blinds. But most of the time, it felt like everyone was asleep. The path itself was lit by a few tall lamp posts, spaced evenly apart. They cast pale yellow circles of light onto the pavement, leaving dark patches in between. It wasn't a long walk. Maybe 3 or 4 minutes from the bus stop to my dad's front, and because I walked it every single week, at almost the same time, I knew it intimately. I knew where the pavement cracked. I knew where the fence posts along the school field leaned slightly. I knew exactly how far it was from the first lamp post to the second. And about halfway up that path, there was one specific lamp post. Not the first one. Not the last one, the one in the middle, standing right beside the metal fence that separated the walkway from the field. That's where it started. Almost every single Thursday night, as I approached that lamppost, it would go out. Not flicker, not dim, it would just shut off. And it always happened when I got within about 3 fence rungs of it. That sounds strangely specific, but when you walk the same path enough times, you start measuring distance without thinking. 3 fence rungs along that fence was about 10 meters. I could picture it perfectly. The first time it happened, I barely reacted. Street lights fail all the time. Bulbs burn out. Maybe it was old wiring. Maybe it was on some weird timer. I kept walking and didn't think much about it. Then it happened the next week. Same lamppost. Same distance. Same sudden blackout. I noticed it more that time, but I still brushed it off. The third week, I was paying attention. The lamp would be glowing normally as I stepped off the bus and began walking. It lit up the pavement clearly. I could see the fence and the edge of the grass. As I got closer, I'd feel this tiny sense of anticipation. And then, almost like it was waiting for me, it would click off. Just like that. Dark, the rest of the path would still be lit by the other lamp posts. Just that one would go out. It left a darker gap in the middle of the walk, forcing me to pass through a shadow before reaching the next pool of light. After it happened a few more times, I stopped pretending it was random. I started watching it carefully from farther down the path. It would be on. Steady, not flickering. No sign of weakness. Then I'd count my steps. 1, 2, 3. And as I crossed into that invisible line about 10 meters away, it would shut off. I remember stopping once, right before the distance where it usually went out. I stood there, just watching the lamp. It stayed on. Calm, bright. The second I took those last few steps forward, it switched off. That was the moment it stopped feeling like coincidence. Some weeks after I walked past it and got a few meters beyond, I'd glance back over my shoulder. And sometimes, as soon as I moved away from it, the lamp would flick back on behind me. That part unsettled me more than anything. It wasn't that I felt chased. It wasn't like something was moving in the field or watching from the houses. I never saw figures. I never heard footsteps. Nothing dramatic happened. It was subtler. It was the feeling of something reacting, like the world responding specifically to me. I started testing it in small ways. One week, I slowed my pace to almost a crawl as I approached it, stretching out the moment. The lamp stayed lit while I was outside that invisible boundary. The instant I stepped into it, darkness. Another week, I tried walking faster than usual. Same result. It didn't matter how I approached it. The result was always the same. For a while, it happened almost every Thursday night without fail. I found myself thinking about it even before getting off the bus. I would step onto the pavement already tense, already watching that lamppost from a distance. It wasn't fear in a loud way. It was a quiet tension. The kind that builds slowly. I mentioned it to my brother one night. I tried to sound casual about it. Hey, that lamppost halfway up the path? It keeps going out when I walk under it. He shrugged and said it was probably faulty wiring, maybe a loose connection, maybe a timer lining up with my walk by coincidence. I wanted that explanation to satisfy me. So I looked into it a little. I came across something called streetlight interference, where certain people claim streetlights shut off around them because of electrical discharge or static buildup. It sounded strange, but at least it was technical, scientific, not supernatural. Still, that didn't explain why it was just that one lamp. Why not the others along the path? Why not random nights? Why was it so consistent? Then, one Thursday, I walked up the path as usual. The lamp stayed on. I slowed down, waiting for it to blink out. It didn't. I stepped closer. Nothing. I walked directly underneath it, still lit. The next week, same thing, bright and steady. After that, it never happened again. Same bus, same time, same route, same distance. But that lamppost never shut off for me again. I never checked during the daytime to see if it had been replaced. I never asked the city if they had done maintenance. Maybe they did. Maybe they swapped out a bulb or fixed a connection. Logically, that's probably what happened. But for those weeks when it was happening, it didn't feel random. It felt targeted. Even now, when I think about that stretch of path, I can see it clearly. The fence to my right, the black field stretching out into nothing, the quiet houses to my left, the pale yellow glow of the lamps, and that one moment every Thursday night when the light would go out as I stepped into its reach. I still tell myself it was electrical, timing, coincidence, but there was something about the consistency of it that never quite sat right. Not frightening in a dramatic way, just quietly unsettling, like the world flickering off for a second, just for me. This happened when I was 15, and even now, years later, I can still see that room exactly the way it was. The layout hasn't faded in my memory. I can picture where the futon sat, where the desk pressed against the wall, where the faint light from outside slipped in through the window. It's all still there, sharp and clear. At the time, my parents had rented out a large warehouse for their business. Instead of renting a separate house, we ended up living in the office space attached to it. It wasn't meant to be a home. It was built for paperwork, storage, and business meetings. But we made it work. My parents took one office, my sister had another, and I used one of the smaller rooms as mine. We stayed there for about 2 years. Living inside a warehouse changes how you experience space. During the day, the building felt industrial and noisy. Even when no one was actively working on the main floor, the place carried sound differently. Footsteps echoed off the high ceilings. Doors sounded heavier when they shut. The air always felt slightly cooler and emptier than a normal house. At night, it was something else entirely. When the building went still, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. The silence wasn't soft. It was wide and open, like you were standing inside something too big for comfort. The hallways connecting the offices seemed longer in the dark. The warehouse floor beyond them felt endless. Over the 2 years we lived there, I experienced small things that unsettled me. Nothing dramatic, just little noises at odd hours when everyone else was asleep. The feeling of being watched while walking through the dark hallway to the bathroom. Moments where I would pause and listen because something didn't feel quite right. But I never had one big, undeniable moment during those first months. It was more like a steady undercurrent. You get used to it. You tell yourself it's just an old building. You adjust. Then came the night I'll never forget. I went to bed like my room was basically just one of the offices. I slept on a futon. At the foot of it sat a desk pressed against the wall. On that desk were my TV and my computer. If someone stood at that desk, they would be directly at the end of my bed. That detail matters. I remember waking up suddenly. There wasn't a loud noise that I can recall. No crash, no shout. I just opened my eyes. The room was dark, but not pitch black. There was faint light filtering in from outside security lamps, enough that shapes were visible, enough to make out outlines of furniture. I glanced toward the clock. I remember thinking it was around 4 a.m., that quiet hour when everything feels suspended. At first, I was just disoriented, the way you are when you wake up unexpectedly. Then I saw them, 4 figures standing at the end of my bed, not shadows, not blurry shapes. Figures. For a moment, my brain didn't panic. It tried to understand. I blinked several times, thinking maybe I was still dreaming. As my vision focused, I began noticing details. They weren't tall, around 5 feet, maybe slightly less. Their bodies were slim, almost fragile looking. Their arms were thin, their fingers were long, longer than normal human fingers. Not monstrous, but noticeably elongated. Their heads were slightly larger than average. Not cartoonishly big, just disproportionate enough to register as wrong. 3 of them stood near my desk. One stood closer to the TV. Each one held something in their hands. It looked like a wand or rod. From the end of each rod came a faint glow, not bright enough to light the entire room, but enough to softly illuminate whatever it was pointed at. The 3 near the desk were slowly moving those glowing rods over objects, over my computer, over the TV stand. It looked like they were scanning or examining. The 4th one stood slightly apart near the television itself. I remember lying there, staring at them, and the strangest part is this: I didn't feel afraid. That still confuses me. If someone had broken into the warehouse and stood at the end of my bed at 4 in the morning, I should have been terrified. My heart should have been racing. I should have been screaming. But I wasn't. I felt calm, detached, like I was watching something unfold rather than being threatened by it. At the same time, I couldn't move. I tried to sit up. I tried to speak. My body didn't respond. My arms felt impossibly heavy. My legs felt pinned. My throat wouldn't produce sound. It wasn't like I was struggling violently. It was more like my body simply wasn't connected to my mind. I was aware, but I was frozen. The moment stretched. I don't know how long it lasted. It could have been 30 seconds. It could have been 2 minutes. Time felt distorted. I remember clearly observing them, the glow of the rods, the slow, deliberate movements, the way their fingers curled around those objects. Then, almost at the same time, all 4 of them stopped. They turned. They faced me. Their heads moved in sync. No dramatic reaction, no sudden aggression, just attention. They were aware that I was awake. Right as they turned, something changed inside me. It felt like my awareness began to dim, like someone slowly lowering a dimmer switch on my consciousness. The edges of the room softened. The focus blurred. The heaviness increased. I didn't black out abruptly. I drifted. Slowly, then I was asleep. When I woke up the next morning, the memory was intact. That's what unsettled me the most. It didn't feel like a dream that dissolves when you try to grab it. The details were solid. The height, the long fingers, the faint glow, the exact positions around my desk. That's when the fear hit. In the moment, I hadn't been scared. In the morning, I was. My heart pounded as I sat up and looked around the room. Everything was exactly where it had been. The desk, the computer, the TV. Nothing moved. Nothing disturbed. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The paralysis, the calmness, the way they turned together. As I got older, I learned about sleep paralysis. I learned how the brain can wake up while the body is still locked in REM sleep, how vivid hallucinations can occur, how people often report figures in the room, a sense of presence, an inability to move or speak. And logically, that explanation fits. The timing, the paralysis, the hyper-real detail. even the strange calmness. Many people describe similar experiences during sleep paralysis, but even with that explanation, the memory feels different from a dream. It doesn't feel symbolic or distorted. It feels like an event I observed. We lived in that warehouse office for 2 years. I experienced other strange moments there. Small thing, but nothing as vivid as that night. I've never seen them again. I don't claim it was aliens. I don't say it was something supernatural for certain. All I know is this. When I was 15, around 4 in the morning, I woke up in a warehouse office and saw 4 small figures standing at the end of my bed, examining my desk with faintly glowing rods. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. They turned toward me, and then I drifted back into sleep. And when I woke up, I felt more shaken than I ever had before. Even now, years later, I can still picture them standing there in that dim room. And no matter how logical the explanation might be, part of me still pauses when I think about how real it felt. Halloween always felt different where we lived. Even before sunset, the whole neighborhood would start changing. Orange lights appeared on porches, fake spider webs stretched across bushes, carved pumpkins glowed in windows, and every kid in town suddenly acted a little louder and braver than usual. The air itself felt colder somehow, even if the temperature wasn't that different from any other fall night. Maybe it was because everyone wanted to believe something scary could happen on Halloween. Back then, my brother, our friend, and I were around middle school age, old enough to think we were fearless, but young enough that movies could still get inside our heads and stay there for days. We had spent most of that evening watching Stephen King's It together. At the time, it was probably the scariest thing we had ever seen. Looking back now, some parts of it seem cheesy, but when you're 12 or 13 years old and watching a killer clown crawl out of darkness and terrorize kids, it feels very real. The whole movie messed with us badly, especially Pennywise. There was just something deeply wrong about him. Clowns are supposed to be funny and harmless, but that movie twisted everything about them into something ugly and terrifying. Every smile looked fake. Every laugh sounded threatening. After the movie ended, none of us wanted to admit how scared we actually were, so naturally we started daring each other to do dumb things outside. That's how kids are. The more frightened you are, the more you pretend not to be. It was already pretty late by then. The neighborhood streets were mostly empty except for a few parked cars and distant porch lights glowing in the dark. Since it was Halloween weekend, people still had decorations everywhere. Some houses had fake gravestones in their yards. Others had hanging skeletons or plastic ghosts moving slightly in the wind. Every shadow looked strange after watching that movie. My brother suggested we go outside for a while instead of sitting in the house thinking about clowns all night. So we did. At first, we were just walking around the neighborhood trying to act tough, talking about scenes from the movie and joking around. But eventually, we started playing this stupid game kids in our area always played. The rules were simple. You stood out in the street at night until a car came. Then you ran and hid before the headlights got too close. Looking back, it sounds incredibly dangerous and unbelievably dumb. But when you're a kid, anything feels entertaining if your friends are doing it too. So there we were, running around in the middle of the road like idiots after watching one of the scariest clown movies ever made. The neighborhood itself was quiet, in that eerie way suburbs sometimes get late at night. You could hear distant dogs barking and leaves blowing across the pavement. Every now and then someone's TV flickered through a window. Most people were already inside for the night. We played for a while without anything happening. A car would appear at the end of the street. We'd laugh and sprint into someone's yard or duck behind bushes until it passed, then come back out again once the road was empty. It felt harmless at first. Then we saw the headlights. At the far end of the street, bright lights slowly appeared around the corner. My brother yelled for us to move, and all three of us took off running toward the nearest house to hide before the car got close enough to see us. The house happened to belong to our neighbor, and not just any neighbor. A clown, an actual clown. Not in the funny he acts like a clown way either. I mean professionally. Birthday parties, events, full costume, makeup, everything. His name was Jingles the Clown. Even before that night, he already made me uncomfortable. During the daytime, he seemed friendly enough, but there was always something unsettling about seeing an adult dressed as a clown outside of a circus or TV show. Sometimes you'd catch glimpses of his costumes hanging in the garage. Other times, you'd see him unloading props or balloons from his van. And the van itself looked creepy enough already. Now imagine seeing all that right after watching it. We barely made it to the side yard before the headlights suddenly turned. Instead of continuing down the street, the van slowly pulled directly into the driveway beside us. I still remember the feeling that hit my stomach in that exact moment. Pure panic. He had seen us. The van stopped only a few feet away. Its headlights washed over the yard, lighting everything up in this harsh white glow. For a second, nobody moved. We just stood there frozen like animals caught in a spotlight. Then the driver door opened. Out stepped Jingles the Clown. Thankfully, he wasn't wearing makeup or the full costume at that moment, but honestly, that almost made it worse somehow. Because we already knew who he was. We didn't need the costume anymore. In our minds, he was already permanently connected to clowns. And after 2 hours of Pennywise murdering children on screen, seeing a real clown suddenly step out of a dark van at night felt horrifying. He immediately started yelling, "What are you kids doing out here?" His voice was loud enough that I remember physically jumping when he shouted. My friend looked ready to cry right there on the spot. My older brother tried talking first, but Jingles was furious. Apparently, somebody had been messing with his Christmas lights recently. In our part of the country, people sometimes started decorating ridiculously early, especially around church communities and neighborhoods where holidays were a huge deal. He had already put lights up outside his house, and he was convinced we were the ones stealing or damaging them. To be fair, 3 kids hiding beside his house in the dark probably looked suspicious. But in our terrified little minds, none of that mattered. All we could think was, the clown caught us. He kept yelling and accusing us while pointing toward his yard. I honestly can't remember everything he said because my brain was running completely on fear at that point. I just remember his anger feeling huge. Adult anger always feels bigger when you're a kid, especially when you know you're trapped and in trouble. Then he told us to come inside. Every instinct in my body screamed no. Even now, decades later, I can still remember standing there thinking about the movie we had just watched. A killer clown luring kids into dangerous places. And now a real clown was angrily telling us to enter his house at night. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud now, but at that age, it genuinely felt like we were walking into a horror movie. We followed him inside because what else were we supposed to do? Running probably would have made everything worse. The inside of the house was warm and smelled faintly like old carpet, popcorn, and something sugary. I remember clown decorations everywhere. Not huge, scary ones, just regular clown-related stuff. Photos from parties, props, bright colors. But after watching it, every single clown image suddenly looked sinister. I felt trapped immediately. His wife was there too, thank God. The second she saw us, the atmosphere shifted a little. She looked confused more than angry. Jingles was still worked up, ranting about the Christmas lights and how kids in the neighborhood kept messing with his decoration, but she seemed calmer and more reasonable. That honestly might have been the only reason I didn't completely lose my mind. Still, sitting inside a clown's house on Halloween night while being accused of crimes we didn't commit felt surreal. My friend barely spoke at all. My brother did most of the talking because he was older and slightly better at handling adults. I mostly just sat there quietly, staring around the room and imagining every possible horrible outcome. Fear makes your imagination go crazy when you're young. At one point, I remember noticing part of a clown costume hanging near a doorway. Bright fabric, oversized shoes underneath. It made my stomach tighten instantly. I couldn't stop thinking about Pennywise smiling in the sewer drains from the movie earlier that night. The timing of everything made it so much worse. If this had happened on any normal day, it probably would have just been an awkward situation with an angry neighbor. But because we had spent the evening terrifying ourselves with horror movies, reality and imagination started blending together in our heads. Every sound inside that house felt louder than normal. Every pause in conversation felt uncomfortable. I remember hearing a clock ticking somewhere and focusing on it because I didn't know where else to look. Jingles eventually called our parents. At least I think he did. That part is blurry because my brother handled most of the conversation while I sat there silently panicked. I do remember feeling humiliated though, like we were criminals being interrogated even though we hadn't actually done anything wrong. At some point, his wife seemed to convince him we probably weren't the people stealing decorations. Or maybe he just calmed down enough to realize we were dumb, scared kids and not criminal masterminds targeting Christmas lights. Either way, eventually, he let us leave. The second we stepped outside again, it felt like escaping prison. I remember the cold night air hitting my face as we practically rushed away from the house. None of us spoke much during the walk home. The excitement and fake bravery from earlier had completely disappeared. We were done playing outside for the night. Honestly, we were probably done functioning as normal human beings for the night. Once we got home, we stayed inside and did absolutely nothing else. No more games, no more wandering around, no more scary movie jokes. I think we were all secretly trying to calm our nerves without admitting how shaken we actually were. And the funny thing is, nothing truly dangerous happened. That's what makes childhood fears so strange sometimes. The man didn't hurt us. He was just an angry neighbor who thought kids were vandalizing his decorations. His wife was nice. We got released. End of story. But fear doesn't care about logic when you're a child. For years afterward, that memory stayed burned into my brain stronger than a lot of genuinely serious events from my childhood. There was just something about the combination of circumstances that created the perfect nightmare scenario for kids our age. Watching it, running through dark suburban streets, seeing headlights approach, hiding beside a clown's house, watching the van pull into the driveway, realizing the clown saw us, hearing him yell, being brought inside, every part stacked together into this bizarre little horror movie that felt incredibly real in the moment. Even now, whenever I think about clowns, my mind immediately jumps back to that night before anything else. Not the movie itself, not Pennywise, but standing frozen beside that driveway while Jingles the clown climbed out of his van, staring directly at us. It's funny how childhood memories, the fear stays vivid long after the details fade away. I don't even know what happened to Jingles after we grew older. Eventually we moved, life changed, and the neighborhood became just another old memory. But every Halloween, without fail, I remember that night. I remember the glow of the headlights sweeping across the yard. I remember the cold feeling in my chest when the van turned toward us. And I remember sitting inside a clown's house after watching the scariest clown movie imaginable, genuinely wondering if we were about to survive the night. As an adult, I can laugh about it now. At the time, though, it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my childhood. Before the next witness tells their story, take a moment to subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. This channel is for the late hours, when sleep is close, but the mind is still awake enough to notice every sound in the room. New true stories arrive here, for anyone drawn to strange encounters, uneasy memories, and nights that never felt normal again. Leave a like if the stories have pulled you in so far. Now, let's return to the darkness. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night, and if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.